Reformation of social structure and governance. For immigration, against Sharia, for Islamic women, against Trump, for women's safety on the internet, for body positivity, against Tyler the Creator. It was foolhardy for us to expect the hive mind would be any more rational than the individual minds that make up its collective whole. But the hive mind's irrationality wasn't exactly unpredictable either. Barbarossa once referred to humanity as being powered by orgasm. I think that is an exceptionally elegant way of putting it. In his video, he talks a little bit about trying to break this cycle by utilising new technology to get ahead of humanity's reproductive curve. I, however, am quite a bit more pessimistic about this. I think whatever technology we create, it is always going to be lagging behind our reproductive curve. The history of the Unix operating system can be traced all the way back to the late 1960s. As a result, some of its core design principles are quite outdated. Starting sometime in the mid-80s, AT&T and Bell Labs began working on Plan 9, a new operating system intended to be an industry-wide replacement for Unix. Most notably, they aimed to redesign the background daemon services which had to be communicated with via a complicated system of internal socket connections with an easily accessible virtual file system, where information could be traded back and forth between different subsystems via the standard operating system's I/O framework. To be honest, you don't even really need to understand what all of that means. You just need to know that Plan 9 was an objective improvement over Unix. In the long run, it may well have been a more efficient, well-designed system. However, on its commercial release in 1995, Plan 9 just didn't represent enough of an improvement to justify everyone in the tech industry throwing out 2 decades worth of legacy Unix infrastructure. And that's really the problem here. Legacy infrastructure. Ideology versus reality. Life is very rarely a simple matter of what could or would or should be ideal, but rather what is practically feasible. If there is any single point that Stardust and I disagree on, this would be it. Stardust often likes to theorise about a hypothetical pill that would supply us with all of our nutrient needs, whilst at the same time acting as a kind of neural inhibitor to effectively suppress any natural desire we would have for food. Looking past my extreme skepticism that such a wonder drug is anything other than a completely fantastical impossibility, even if it were developed, I am thoroughly unconvinced that the majority of people would actually want to take it. There is a reason why the birth control pill has seen widespread adoption, but anaphrodisiac drugs, aka reversible chemical castration, has not. The pill doesn't simply solve the problem of unwanted pregnancy. I mean, abstinence can do that. You don't fuck, you don't get pregnant. The pill solved the problem in such a way that we could indulge in our base biological desire for sex more than we ever have before without the unwanted cost. Unlike anaphrodisiacs, it solved the problem by actually catering to our legacy biological systems rather than trying to actively fight them, suppress them, force them to fit an ideology, or excise them entirely. I mean, this is the very foundation for the entire field of human factors. Our understanding of ergonomics goes far beyond correct posture for a desk chair. We now understand that our technology also has to account for human behaviour, including some of its more irrational and emotional aspects. There is a psychological reason why stoplights are red. There is a physiological reason why we have ultimately settled on a widescreen aspect ratio for film and television. There is a neurological reason why we prefer text arranged into narrow vertical columns. And there is a reason why Twitter functions the way it does too. Like the birth control pill and stoplights and widescreen televisions and newspaper print columns, Twitter is a biological best fit for our evolved social communication needs. And whether you like it or not, a big part of that evolved sociobiology is related to sexual dimorphism and reproduction. The female, not the male, determines all the conditions of the animal family. Where the female can derive no benefit from association with the male, no such association takes place. Assuming that Robert Briffaut was even remotely correct, why is it surprising to anybody that 90 years after he wrote these words, Twitter, the predominant social communication framework, would, by popular female demand, eventually start filtering unpopular thought through a trust and safety council, heralding women's organisations like Feminist Frequency, Women Action in the Media, and Hollaback as the vanguard, whilst at the same time removing contrarian men like Milo Yiannopoulos from the platform entirely. Equally unsurprising is how the clunkiest social communication networks like Facebook and Google are slowly starting to follow Twitter's lead. This is simply a case of our technology catering to our innate gynocentric nature. To the extent that some platforms have a mission statement claiming that they will never adopt these kind of identitarian censorship practices, I think the result of that, provided they keep their word, will also be that those platforms never see anything approaching widespread adoption. You know, Plan 9 versus Unix. It's a nice ideal, but it just doesn't have enough backwards compatibility with our legacy biological instincts to actually work. Many of these concepts were theorized by Donald Norman in his book Emotional Design, and there is a reason why virtually every designer, marketing executive, and cognitive psychologist has a copy of this book sitting somewhere in their bookshelf. The bizarre atomic juicer on the front cover sums up the concept of emotional design perfectly. It's not enough to simply design a product that people need. In a saturated marketplace, you have to design a product that people actually want on a visceral emotional level. The unfortunate fact is that on a visceral emotional level, the average person who needs a communication platform like Twitter doesn't actually want the same open society that you want. The average person will happily trade intellectual freedom for the comfort of perceived safety, particularly the perceived safety of the women folk. And do not underestimate the collective power of this gynocentric instinct. We as a species will yield and literally turn a blind eye not just to the medical facts, but our own reproductive preferences as men to pretend that obesity is now okay because enough women have started to feel bad that they can't stop stuffing Big Macs into their disgusting face holes. This is really the core problem with libertarian philosophy. Just get rid of the government. Well, to varying degrees, we've apparently done that already. Twitter is about as anarchistic as it gets. The problem is that people, the real people who make up that system, anarchist or otherwise, are not inherently libertarian leaning. Even without any kind of centralised government, authoritarian social movements like Stop Gamergate and Everyday Sexism, which engage in very oppressive thought policing via mass social coercion, will still organically arise through group consensus. The stock market is a rather perilous place, and Twitter, the company, may eventually collapse like many people are hoping it will. But whatever platform replaces it will probably look almost identical, right down to the feminist-led Trust and Safety Council. It is a matter of convergent evolution. Our technological innovations will always converge on a best fit for our fixed biology. As a result, whatever system we design to act as a platform for mass human communication will inevitably see the emergent biases of human social structure start to surface on that platform. Our technology is unfortunately a double-edged sword. We cannot streamline people's ability to mass communicate without also streamlining their ability to engage in mass social bias.